Yo, what up? Gabriel here. Coming at you with a data dive video. I haven't done one of these in a while. It's not going to be for me. This is going to be for Baalorlord, kind of an OG in the Slay the Spire scene. Believe he's held various world records in the game at several points, and he graciously released his 2022 year-to-date data. So we're just going to take a look at this and see what's interesting. And I also want to just do a little bit of a plug here. If you want your own data, basically output the same way I'm going to do in this video, and you just want it for yourself, go ahead and I'll put it in the description too. But just send an email to Gabriel Gaming, all one word, all non-capital letters for what it's worth, at gmail.com. It's not too hard for me to spit these out with the way I've built this. Takes me just a few minutes. If you want to just zip up your run data, just find your Slay the Spire install location, and it should be in there under like runs. I'll post the exact kind of structure to look at to find your runs as well in the video description. But without further ado, let's just kind of get into it here. So we're looking at Baalorlord, and the first just easy stats we can glean are like the win rates. So overall on the year, he has a 57% win rate. These are, by the way, all Ascension 20 heart kills. For what it's worth, I'm filtering out like runs where it chooses the seed. I don't think he really had any of those, but that's just how I've built it. That way I'm filtering that out for any player I run this against. Defect, and this is kind of what I usually expect to see, by the way, of how I kind of view the characters. I know it's going to be different from player to player, but this is kind of how I usually see it. I personally, I know Zeknar skews the perception of Silent, but I honestly do think Silent is the weakest character in the game. Not far behind is Defect, and then Ironclad has like a significant gap, and Watcher an even more significant gap. I guess the only surprise to me is that the Watcher doesn't have more of a gap on Ironclad here, but I guess when you get to these high of win rates, it's the data isn't going to look like it is for the rest of us. Don't feel bad if you send in your data and your win rates are quite low. They're usually lower than you think they are. Trust me on this. I myself, I'm not too hot. Like Defect, Ironclad, Silent at the moment, they're all about 30%. Ironclad's a little bit higher. My Watcher is pretty alright. I believe it's at 60% currently. I'm kind of trying to perfect a strategy there. But that's neither here nor there. There's not really much more interesting to say here, though, right? Like, it's just kind of shows how he's doing with the classes here. Very good with all of them, and there's some that perform better than others. This is just the wins and losses over time. If you wanted, you could kind of just get a sense for when you're on a bad or good streak. Like, you can see, like, this was a rough day for him. March 26, 5 losses on the Silent. I can definitely relate to that. But at the same time, you can find the good days too. Like maybe, yeah, like here. Wins. I'm guessing his losses were like he had a loss that day and just wanted to get a win. Because of the wins, it's like he'll get a win and then that's it. He doesn't really try to hammer out a win on each day. But that's not much more interesting there. Win rate over time. With a player that's played this long in the game, it's hard to get kind of what you might want to see as a player that's improving, which is like a very upward slope. But when you're already winning at the high win rate that he is, it's going to be hard to get that. But for what it's worth, you do still kind of see that with a lot of the classes. Maybe not Silent, but like, there's a general upward trend with a lot of these. Now, this one was interesting to me because this This is not what I usually see. Granted, I've only ran the data for a few players that have been able to submit to me along with my own, but in every case, Act 2 was the one where people die the most. For him, it's almost tied between Act 2 and Act 4, with Act 4 slightly edging out Act 2. Now keep in mind, I don't look at this as like, oh, his Act 4 game is suffering, because if you look at the Act 4 defeats versus Act 4 victories, it's heavily skewed in victory's favor, right? More of what I kind of just find interesting is that it seems like he's like particularly good at Act 2 compared to the rest of the trends that I've seen with players. For me, we usually see the graph would usually look like this. Act 3 is typically the easiest. Act 1 is somewhere usually between Act 2 and Act 3. And Act 4 is usually a toss-up. But Act 2 is always the one where people die the most. So it's very interesting that it seems like he has some pretty decent know-how of how to beat Act 2. Now the enemy encounter data, we got a bunch of stats to go on here because I find a lot of these interesting. And actually the first one I have here I find the least interesting, because this is just a little thing about data, but everybody always looks at averages. It's always averages, right? But average is like never actually a good stat to use for basically anything other than just like a score for something. But and you can kind of see it here with the heart. It's like the average damage is 463, because I'm guessing this is blasphemy. He must have died to blasphemy. But like, yeah, one of the fights says he lost 100,000 damage, so that heavily skews an average. But a much better metric to use is usually just median. I assume what you're trying to look for with an average or a median is kind of just what is the most common or typical damage that I seem to be taking, right? So in this case, median usually is just going to give you a better result. It's not going to get heavily skewed by these huge outliers in either minimum or maximum. I believe you could get maybe negative damage. Okay, maybe not. In Monster Train you can, but like if you were to heal, it would give you a negative number. But I guess Slay the Spire data doesn't do that. Either way, but anyway, by far it seems like the heart does the most damage to him. It's not necessarily surprising, though I will say it's not really in line with, again, kind of similar to like his Act 2 data. It's not in line with what I've seen with the other players. Heart is definitely usually up toward the top, but like the Collector is typically up there. I see Collector several places down here. Still one of his highest damage, but Collector, man, I don't even know what you call them, the shield and the spear. Looks like he destroys those, because I don't even see them on the first page here. I think Time Eater is usually up there too, Awaken 1. And yeah, he does have those up there. I mean, but still, like, the heart is like significantly having a gap on the rest. So that's kind of interesting to see. And Hexaghost. That's a very interesting that's his second. I would say that's also not super uncommon. Hexaghost is usually just really hard not to take a bunch of damage on in Act 1. And it's also, I would say, pretty rare to not take damage on Hexaghost, right? That also kind of further pushes it toward that direction. Now, this one is the biggest outlier. I'm surprised that Lagavulin is even on this first page. That is definitely outside of what I've seen. Now, I would say this number is still pretty low compared to the players like my own data. This is usually just what I'm seeing is I take a lot more damage in general, but it is interesting that the third most damaging oh, you know what? It's the event. Okay, never mind. That's I'm tripping. So this is just a weird data thing. So this means it was like, this makes complete sense, by the way. It's not Lagavulin the fight. Lagavulin, I can never say that right. Lagavulin the fight is not this. This is Lagavulin from the actual question mark event, which means you don't get 3 turns for some reason, some goddamn dumb reason. You don't get the 3 turns to power up. He just immediately starts, you know, fucking you over. So no surprise there, actually, that this is up there. It's just, it's very rare to get this event, I think, because I think a lot of players might just skip it, right? Because you can kind of tell from the description of the event who's it going to be, and if it's Lagavulin, you might just not want to take that risk. But when you've played as many runs as Baalorlord, you're probably bound to have taken this event, and then, yeah, you probably take some damage because it's ridiculous. I believe he saps your strength and dexterity right from the get-go, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, yeah. And we can go down a few pages here if it's interesting. Shell Parasite, I believe, is the avocado, as we know him. No surprise there. He's a bastard. Yeah, this fight. Interesting, though, that he takes more damage on this fight. Just the normal avocado versus the avocado rat. That is definitely outside the norm. This is usually on the first page for everybody, the avocado rat. So, seems like he's able to certainly get some power. You know, it could just be variance, by the way. You know, even with this amount of sample size of data, which is way more than your typical player will have, there's still a lot of variance. But one, like, kind of loose conclusion we could draw there is that maybe he's pretty good in Act 2 of, like, powering his deck up before the advanced hallways or hard pools, depending on what term you want to use. But yeah, and then conversely, there's probably, yeah, a lot of these fights, his typical scenarios that he just doesn't take damage, right? 3 cultists. Wow, that's pretty impressive that he can almost always not take damage on 3 cultists. I've always found that fight kind of hard, but yeah, 2 fungi beasts. No surprise there. That's one of the easier advanced hallways of Act 1. The shapes are ridiculously easy. I'm still convinced that these are easier than most Act 2 fights, even if you like face them in Act 2. Chosen, the Knob, the Colosseum stuff. Giant Head, definitely probably the easiest elite in the game. He literally takes 0 on, you know, the median experience. Jawworm Horde, pretty impressive there to not take 0 any damage typically. Then yeah, all the way down on to Darklings is the first one where he's taking an actual median damage. And why you're seeing, the reason why you're seeing a decimal here is because even though you know, it's typically going to just take the middle value. If it's not even distribution, it has to like basically take a value between them. Not sure if that made sense, but yeah, it's a median calculation. It's a P50, I should say. This is a P50 calculation. But yeah, if we go back, we can also just see minimum damage is interesting. So, you know, if I sort this way, it's almost all going to be 0s, but it is interesting just to see that the only event that actually minimally always took damage was that Lagavulin event, which isn't surprising given the context of how ridiculous that fight is, and also how few times you're finding. He only found it 5 times in the whole set, you know, compared to like the hundreds that you're facing all the other stuff. He still beat it 5 out of 5 times, though, and that's pretty impressive. And then the max damage, obviously, I'm pretty convinced this is Blasphemy. I don't really see how any other way that could happen. Giant Head, though, funnily enough, is, even though the average and median damage are so low. Oh, and he never... Wow, so he has the most max damage taken, like, legitimately from that fight, but he didn't even lose the fight. You'll notice over here, the loss count is 0. There's not any fight he's ever lost to Giant Head in the sample size. But it is funny that he still, like, had to survive 144 damage. That is wild. That is a wild amount of damage to win with. And then Awakened One. I hate this boss. This by far is my most hated Act 3 boss, by the way. I'll take Time Eater any day over this, typically. Unless it's Watcher. I'll take Awakened One with Watcher and probably Ironclad, but man, especially with Defect and Silent, I just hate Awakened One. And we'll look at the class specific stats here too, after we go through these. Let's see. Where was I at? Awakened One. Yeah. Still beats it at a pretty good rate here, though. So the way I'm looking at the loss count and the lose rate here, it's not whether you won the overall run or not. It's that you lost on that battle or if you beat that battle. Hopefully that makes sense. So like Giant Head here, this doesn't mean that later on he didn't still lose to the heart, right? It just means when he faced Giant Head, did he beat it or did he die to it? So it's expected that the lose rates will be pretty low over here. But we can still kind of tease those out to see which ones he would typically lose the most to, right? So the heart, there's not really too much surprise there. For me, myself, it's actually, I believe it's a collector. I'll do a dive on my data and maybe another video. I want to get some more runs under the year, though, since I've had a lot of time off. Because there's just not much sample size for me to go off right now with my own data. But yeah, the heart has a pretty big gap, 15%. So 15% of the time he faces the heart, he loses to it. But that's not a bad thing, right? That means 85% of the time on Ascension 20, no reloads, by the way. I know you bastards like to claim you don't reload, but I don't believe it. Power to you if you don't. But I suspect anyone that doesn't make content, I suspect that you reload, save scum your asses off. So you got to also give some extra credit here for the fact that, he's not save scumming. So like to have an 85% win rate against the heart is, there's not many players that can do that. Maybe a handful. But anyway, Hexaghost, and then funny. There is some correlation between the median damage and lose rate here as well, right? Like Hexaghost, just as the same as was second in the median damage, is the second in the lose rate. But granted, now we get down to basically what we see here is kind of a good thing, right? It's the lose rate is just really low for everything else, right? Like even 6%. That just means most of the time he faces any given battle, he's beating it. There's not one particular battle outside the heart probably that gives him an issue. But this is something you're not going to see with your typical player, right? Like mine is not going to look like this. And, unless you're a god as well, you're probably not going to see it like this. And that's why actually, if I may plug again, my export of this data, my offer to export your data, this is one of the better pieces of data your typical player can look at, in my opinion. You'll see the lose rate wildly different here for some of these fights, and it really can clue you into fights that you just struggle with, right? A lot of bosses as well. It clued me into the fact that I really struggle on Act 2 bosses. So either, and you kind of have to draw your own conclusions there based on the context of how you play. For me, it's it could come down a lot to the micro of the battle, but it may just come down to macro as well. I'm not properly preparing for these particular bosses. But yeah, there's not a whole lot interesting there for a player of this caliber, because he's just not going to lose to any particular fight that much more than the others, because he has a very solid game plan and knowledge of how to navigate all these fights. Then we got the card pick data. I'm going to go back and we'll relook at this with some other ways we can look at it, but this is the overall pick data. And right now I'm collapsing upgraded cards into unupgraded. We can look at that to see if there's a massive difference, but it just makes the data output a little better if I'm not separating out the upgraded version of these cards versus the unupgraded ones. But it is kind of interesting to see, in some cases, like how much different an upgraded card performs versus non-upgraded. And we'll look at that. But now this is, I don't know, it's not that interesting, right? But skip counts as a card. And by the way, the way I'm looking at this data, I'm not saying like say I have 5 holograms. I'm not counting that here as 5 wins. I'm simply saying, was hologram in your deck, and did you win that run or lose that run? I don't really care if you have multiple copies of the card. That could be an interesting data point to look at, but I didn't want to bother with that whole bag of worms. I'm just simply saying, is the card in your deck? Did you win or lose? That's what we're looking at here. And I also wanted to just look at you know, the difference from the overall win rate of that class. I thought that was just kind of interesting stat to look at. Like, do certain card picks have a significant positive or negative effect on the win rate? But yeah, so right now I'm just sorting by the total wins. So, you know, factoring out skip, because who cares about skip, right? Hologram, his most winning card, if you look at it in terms of this, was the most present card in the most amount of wins. Now we can look at win rates and stuff as well, but let's just really quick maybe go through a page or two of these, shrug it off another one. So like, to me, what I'm seeing here, you know, when I see that there's a ton of wins with these cards, and this is positive, by the way. You would say a negative here if it actually had a negative effect on the win rate. So it's like, it's picked a lot. It had a positive effect on the win rate. It had a high win rate as well. You can be pretty damn sure that's a good card, right? Hologram seems to be a pretty good card. Now you don't want to like look too much into this to the point where you're just always taking a hologram now, though, right? Because hologram doesn't make sense in a lot of decks, or it doesn't make sense at the point in maybe Act 1, right? Until you have some other cards that it works with. So you don't want to like go too far down that rabbit hole of like, oh god, that's a good card, I'm just always going to pick it, right? There are cards like that, Wraith form, but when we have this high amount, we're basically, you know, every card on here, by the way, is a common card, because you just don't find the uncommons and rares enough to account for this many wins. But it is just a good sign that maybe if you yourself don't pick these cards very often, maybe you need to start thinking about situations where they might be good, because those situations clearly come out quite a lot often for Baalorlord. So hologram, shrug it off, acrobatics, cut through fate for Watcher, piercing wail silent, backflip silent, pommel strike, ironclad, third eye Watcher. That's an interesting one to me. I've never actually really thought this was that good of a card. I mean, it's still having a positive effect on his win rate, but it's not quite as positive as some of these other cards, right? This card isn't really listed in Meryl's tier list, right? But it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad card. It's just, it's pretty clear, though, to me that Baalorlord isn't maybe using the Meryl-style play of Watcher, which is fine, right? But I wonder, he could probably get that win rate up a bit higher with Watcher, because I will say, like I said at the beginning of this video, my win rates on the other 3 classes are pretty low. They're like 30%-ish. But the Watcher, I'm up about 60%, which isn't super far off of Baalorlord's, and I have very little playtime on the Watcher, and I'm just following essentially Meryl's game plan. So that's maybe something that Baalorlord could find from this data. It's like maybe he could benefit from just maybe trying some different strategies with Watcher. Defect cool-headed. There's not too many surprises here when I look at this other than the third eye. Like, a lot of these cards, we know that they're really good. Calculated gamble, dagger throw. So you can tell Baalorlord is really making quite a lot of use of the whole discard package with Silent, right? Which I suck with. If you look at my stats, I hardly ever win these discard runs. And that's another tough thing to think about here, because, you know, these players like Baalorlord, Zeknar, Jorbs, so on and so forth, they have so much game knowledge and they make so few mistakes My kind of personal view on the whole discard silent package is that, like, for your average player like me, the rest of us, the people that aren't just absolute gods at this game, I don't think going into the discard is actually going to result in many wins, because there's so few mistakes you can make. Like, yeah, you can win pretty consistently with it, but I'm kind of getting on a tangent. We'll just keep going down here. Beam cell with a defect. I've always wondered about this card. It seems like a lot of the higher level players really do like it, but I don't know. It looks similar to Third Eye. I mean, it's still positive, so it's not. I can't say it's bad, but I do wonder if maybe it's overtaken a little bit. I don't know. Battle Trance, no surprise there. Dark Embrace, the whole the whole exhaust package of Ironclad has proven to be just the best, most consistent way to win with it. So no surprises there. True Grit, Turbo Defect. That's a card I used to not take much before the year, and it's really good. That's actually the granted, it doesn't make sense in every deck, right? That's why the overall wins isn't quite up there with a hologram, but the actual positive effect on the win rate is really high here, right? 16% for a common card. That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good. Let's go for a few more pages. This is pretty interesting. Malace. Oh, wow. So this is the first rare card we've seen on this list, right? That means he sure is picking that a lot. Shit. I didn't add that. Fuck. Okay. There was another panel I meant to add. Well, I'll just have to maybe follow up with that. But I had something where I also looked at like what the skip rate of cards were. I'll just have to do that in a follow-up video maybe. But if I were to guess, that means he's almost never skipping Malace. I mean, to have that much, and also, it certainly doesn't seem wrong to take it that much, because it has a 30% positive effect on his win rate. Watcher, Meditate. Yeah, that's a really good card. Defect Cold Snap. Now, here's one thing. We're going to go back, but when I go back in a little bit, what we're going to look at is the card pick rate, or the card pick data, splitting Act 1 out versus the rest of the game. Because I wouldn't say that this means Cold Snap is like being overtaken here, or that it's not performing well. It's a very minor, lower percent from the overall win rate. But the context of Cold Snap, this is basically always an Act 1 card, right? And if a card is always typically getting picked earlier, you got to factor in that there are Act 1 losses, there are Act 2 losses. They make up a good chunk of the losses, right? Even with Baalorlord typically doing really well in those acts, that's going to skew the overall win rate for a card like this lower, right? Because you're going to pick it because it's going to be good for Act 1, but since you do lose in Act 1 and Act 2 somewhat often, just means that you're not picking Cold Snap later on when the run has already a higher chance of winning, right? Since you're past Act 1 and Act 2. Burning Pact, yep, Exhaust, good. Offering. So we're looking at that. And I'm not too worried about overall losses. I can look at those as well, which is funny because actually Hologram also accounts for the most losses, but still it's a positive effect on the win rate. So like, do I really care that much about overall losses? Probably not. But what I do probably care to look at here is the diff from overall win rate. Now, I don't really care about any of these, right? Because the sample size is so low that who cares, right? It's 1 and 0, 2 and 0. These I don't really care about. This one maybe becomes a little bit more interesting, 4 and 0. It's still pretty low sample size, but Secret Technique, that's the one where you pull out a specific skill out of your deck with a silent. I mean, that makes sense, right? It's going to be good for that class. We got a 6-0 with Fusion. That's very interesting. I've always had horrible experiences every time I pick this card. Wait, Fusion. Yeah, right. That's the one where you generate an energy orb for 2. Costs 2 entire energy to do it. You can upgrade it to be 1 energy. But yeah, he hasn't lost with it. 6-0. Pretty impressive. But still, like, very not takeable, right? You think about how many runs he's done, and he's only done it 6 times. But it does show that it is good when it is good, right? It's a niche card that performs well when you know when to pick it. Regret. Let's get to some... We want to get to someone with... Like dual wield. Here we go. Like 10-0. Niche card still, right? But maybe less niche than a lot of these others that we've seen. Cool-headed with Ironclad. Well, we see that he's done some prismatic shard runs. But anyway, dual wield... Not really too surprising that if you know when to pick it and you know when to not pick it, you're going to have a pretty good win rate, right? 10-0. You either use it for some attacks or powers. You can go infinite with it as well. There's a lot of context there, but yeah, with that much experience in the game, he knows when to make dual wield shine. Come on, I need more. Force field, interesting. That's the one where you play. It costs 4 energy, but every power you play, it goes down in cost, and I think it does like 12 block. So 14-2, niche, but not incredibly niche. Pretty good card when it makes sense. Reaper, not surprised here. This is one of those... There's some of these rares in the game that are just like almost always takeable. 21-1, that's not far off of the Malace pick rate. It could just be that he didn't see it as much. But 95% win rate with the Reaper. A 32% positive effect on his Ironclad win rate. 21-1. Hard to deny the power of Reaper. Dagger Throw. This is so interesting. Like, we did look at that one already, but yeah, for a common card that gets picked pretty often, a 32% win rate increase. You look at my data on Dagger Throw, it is not good. So it's like, you can tell that if I were to ever perfect my game with Silent, I have to learn that discard strategy, right? Because I clearly don't do something right here. Because hard to deny the consistency here with the card, right? Obviously, it doesn't make sense in every run. But he knows when to take it. And when you take it, seems to be pretty often. And it seems to perform pretty damn well. That's an 80% win rate when he has it in his deck, compared to the overall like 48% win rate or whatever it was with the Silent. So yeah, I like seeing the high numbers on the wins here to know, there's consistency there. Sentinel, that's the block card that gives energy when exhausted. We see the exhaust package represented quite well here, right? Diva form. Yeah, you can. Now it performed really well for him, 9-0, but you can tell he's not using the Meryl Watcher strategy, right? Because Meryl wouldn't really take this card hardly ever. But that's Watcher, right? It's like, when you evaluate it, it's like, Diva form, not a bad card, actually a good card, but the 100% ideal way, Meryl has a 95% win rate or whatever on Watcher, like the ideal way to play Watcher just kind of involves going this particular stance strategy and ignoring these other cards that are technically powerful. Watcher is such a weird class compared to the rest of the game, right? If they ever nerf the stance package, then it's like, okay, now all the strategies that maybe somebody like Baalorlord has been playing with, he'll be well versed in them and he can just continue to win at the same rate, essentially, right? They should probably nerf the stance dance package if they care about any sort of balance between the classes, by the way. But yeah, we're getting pretty deep into the weeds here. Let's now just look maybe at the opposite. Are there things that have like a significant downward trend on his win rate? Now again, I don't care about these 0 and 1 things. Let's try to get something with some actual sample size. Even 3-0 I don't care about. 1 and 8 quick slash. That's very interesting, huh? So that's a common card. And he really doesn't take it much. It's interesting, right? Because it's very similar to Dagger Throw, but it does 1 less damage and it doesn't discard. Upgraded, they do the same damage actually, but very interesting that I don't know how much the extra 1 damage comes into play, but it's very interesting. It really must show that the discard portion of Dagger Throw is the biggest upside of it, right, compared to Quick Slash. Now again, there's not much... is this because Quick Slash is bad? I don't know. Like, in my own data, Quick Slash performs okay, but like, the way I could interpret this is he clearly just doesn't value the card much if he's picking it only as a common card. He's only picking it 9 times in a gigantic sample size, right? And probably when he is picking it, the only time he's picking it, since he doesn't like the card, is the other choices must be awful and his deck must just be awful, right? So there's some context there on why it might be such a low rate, and it also could just be because the card straight up sucks. That's entirely possible too. You know, it's mildly better than a strike in terms of damage. It costs the same amount of energy and it just cycles itself. Its upgrade is a 4 damage upgrade, which is alright, but it's not like a pommel strike upgrade where you get an entire extra draw, right? So Quick Slash might just be a bad card. Bane, no surprise here. I feel like since the dawn of time, Bane has just never performed well. I'd be interested if Zeknar ever releases his data, though. I know he'll take Bane from time to time. I do wonder, though, like, does it have a positive effect on the win rate? I mean, there's some context here, too, where it's like, if you're picking Bane... Like, usually if you have a decent poison deck, you would never really need Bane, so it's like you're kind of in a weird position, I assume, when you're taking Bane, where it's like you barely have some poison... Or you're just your overall damage. Maybe you never got any other attacks, and like Bane is your attack. But I will say, I have never once seen Bane represented well in any player's data. It's always like a very bad card. This is interesting too, Predator. This is a lot different. Like you know, Jorbs, for example, really loves Predator, right? I don't know. Zeknar, I think, likes it generally, but not nearly as much as Jorbs. But it's interesting because, like, the pick rate is pretty low for Baalorlord on this card. And also, it just isn't actually seem to be that winning. Granted, the sample size is so low that, I don't know, could be some variance there. But, you know, only a 20% win rate with it, 3 and 12. I myself have kind of noticed this as well. I still pick it a lot. Because I think I'm influenced by watching so many, you know, historically I've watched a lot of Jorbs and whatnot. And it's in my mind, I'm like, okay, Predator should be good. But I will say in my own data as well, Predator doesn't really perform that well. If you think about it, I mean, it's not like that efficient of damage. 15 for 2. It's kind of like somewhat better than a strike, like playing 2 strikes. The card draw portion is what I guess really makes it quite good, though. But yeah, it isn't actually picked that much for Baalorlord, and it doesn't really perform that well. So interesting to see that, right? But I see it perform pretty well for Jorbs, right? So it's like some of these might just be like, I don't know, maybe the way he builds a deck just doesn't lend itself to Predator. It's hard to get the entire context, right? FTL, interestingly enough, that's another card a lot of people really like, but he isn't picking it that much, and it isn't performing that well for him. Similar to Baalorlord here, I've never really found FTL to be that good either. Yeah, it might cycle itself depending on the deck you're running, but like, well, I just find it's like not that much of an upside card. That's like okay as Act 1 damage, but it still like isn't that impactful. But yeah, very interesting. Rainbow, Masterful Stab. That's another interesting one too. Only 3 and 8. Doesn't pick it much. I also like. I'll take it Act 1 if I really need damage, because it is technically really good Act 1 damage. But it's like this card probably falls off harder from mid to late game than any card in the game. I feel it is like in some cases worse than some curses. I would say like at least some of the curses exhaust themselves, right? Whereas this is just an actual unplayable card in your deck. So, no huge surprises there. Not much sample size there. Deadly Poison, not a huge surprise there. I mean, there's some context that you're probably only adding in Act 1, so there is a downward trend on the win rate simply from that, but also it's a card I've kind of scaled my view back onto. I used to think it was okay. Now I'm like, it's not that good. It's not that good. It'll work for some fights, definitely. Like it upgraded, it's pretty good into Lagavulin and stuff, but I don't know. It's just not that impactful a lot of the time. And yeah, we could look at overall win rates, but it's not going to really be that much different from looking at it from the difference from overall win rate. Reinforced Body. Interesting that doesn't do well for him. I've always thought that's a pretty good card. But we'll go through and we're going to come back to this and look at it per act, just to show what kind of differences we might see there. Now this is the relic data. We can see which ones account for the most wins, and we'll do kind of a quick look through just as we did with those cards. So Bega Prep, no surprise there, stupidly powerful for a common relic. Both these just kind of stupidly powerful for a common relic. Though I will say, and we're collapsing all the characters here. I could also splay the relic data out per character. Maybe we'll look at that after, see if it changes much here. But the difference from overall win rate, we're just looking at the overall win rate now, which is 57%. But it is interesting that even though it counts for a lot of wins, it actually doesn't have quite the positive effect on the win rate that Centennial Puzzle has. So I could almost say that Centennial Puzzle might be stronger than Bega Prep. I mean, I can't say it definitively, obviously, but I might use it as a supporting argument, right? That it has an entire 13% higher win rate, while still accounting for the same amount of wins. Anchor. Basically, we're going to see a lot of common relics here, right? When we're looking at total wins, because that's just the stuff you're going to see the most. And we'll see the ones that are just generally good, right? Happy Flower. I mean, honestly, I would have thought Happy Flower even higher, but all these Smooth Stone, Bega Marbles, Nunchaku, Runic Pyramid. I mean, that says it all right there. Like, you got 9, we're looking at 10 results here. 9 of them are common relics, and then before even getting to an uncommon relic, we have a frickin' boss relic, Runic Pyramid. By far, the best boss relic in the game, in my opinion. I mean, I have another panel we'll look at that's specifically looking at boss relics, and we'll get more into that, but let's just keep going down the list here. Tori Ornithopter, however the hell you say that. Ornithopter? Ornithopter, whatever that is. But that's the one that gives you a 5 health per potion. It's weird because like that, every streamer I've looked at loves this relic, and I myself, I don't know. It's always felt like very not that impactful to me. Like, because I feel like you don't drink that many potions in a run typically on Ascension 20, because it's like you're kind of saving them. Like, I feel like it doesn't actually heal that much health over a run, but hey, for what it's worth, it's performing quite well for him, right? 46 and 15. Warpaint, Bronze Scales. We still haven't gotten to an uncommon relic, I believe. Pendev, I think, is still a common. Potion Belt, Orichalcum. I think Pantograph is the first uncommon we get to here. Yeah, Pantograph. And no surprise there, it's a really strong relic, especially in Ascension 20 where you got to get through the double boss, right? The double Act 3 boss. That really helps with that fight. In general, though, that just you're healing a ton of HP over the course of a run with this. And a Mind Bloom event, it even gives you an extra HP, I believe, as well. Horncleat. This is my favorite of the, the boat relics, because I find that turn 2 is almost always going to be a rough turn with incoming damage on any fight. And it gives you a good amount of defense then. So like the other ones might get wasted. This one never really gets wasted. This defense is almost always relevant. Not surprised to see this one represented pretty well. Kunai, no surprise there. I would assume we're going to see when we look at it per character, that maybe even Silent has something there. Strawberry. Now, technically, it's not, of the uncommon relics we've looked at so far, it's been the worst, which is not a surprise to me. It's so non-impactful, I feel, like 7 HP or whatever, and then Blood Vial even worse. Again, not that surprising to me. I've always thought this is kind of complete trash. Like 2 HP is a joke. Like, I mean, if you think about it, Bag of Prep is literally the Silent starting relic. Blood Vial doesn't even compare to the Ironclad starting relic. It's like 1/3 of the value. So I don't know. It's weird to me how low the HP that Blood Vial has. But in the same vein, like, I feel like it still heals more than Toy Ornithopter throughout a run, but I don't know, whatever. Got another boss relic here, or we got some boss relics here. Slaver's Collar, Coffee Dripper. Interesting that Slaver's Collar gets... I guess Slaver's Collar kind of becomes the default choice in a lot of situations. But I've never really liked it going into Act 2. I assume maybe he's just mainly picking it into Act 3, but I don't know that we could actually figure that out. Maybe we'll do that in a bit here. Akabeko. Ancient Tea Set somehow performing amazingly for him. I don't understand how that one's doing so well. This has always seemed like a pretty disappointing relic to me when I get it. But I don't know. It definitely has some upside, I suppose. But yeah, we keep on going down the list here. You can kind of see good old ceramic fish. Well, I guess it's amazing. I don't know. But that just goes to show, like, you take a lot of this with a grain of salt, especially with common relics, because you're always just kind of finding them. By the time you find them, you're probably already in a good spot. Surprised Preserve Insect does so poorly. I mean, it doesn't do poorly, but just compared to like a lot of the others. But let's now look at maybe we can look at the difference from the win rate. Now this is interesting to me. 6-0 with Brimstone. Holy shit! I've always thought this one is like fun to use, but it almost always dies to the heart. So very interesting that the 6 times he took it, he won every single one of them. And it's a shop relic only, so he's specifically buying it, you know. But I would have to assume maybe he has disarms and reapers already in hand when he buys it. There's probably some context there. Because certainly without those, I don't see how you beat the heart. Or maybe some intangible ghost, whatever you call them, the ghost cards. Cauldron, yeah, that's just a potion. I mean, a lot of these still have like pretty low sample size, so I don't care too much about a lot of these. Abacus, interesting, 10 and 0. I assume the context there is that he's going infinite, so it makes sense. Dolly's Mirror, no huge surprise that this is super powerful. I can't remember if this is shop relic only. I don't think it is, but yeah, that's just the one where you duplicate a card in your deck. It's almost always just super powerful. Golden Eye. I feel like some of these, the name is like not the actual proper name because it has like the beta name or something. Because I'm trying to think. Golden Eye. I don't know what that is. No idea. Frozen Eye. That's a big brain one. I've been getting better at it, but that's like, God, I actually hate runs where I have to pick this because I know it's going to make the run probably be a win or give myself the best chance at a win, but I just turned what could be an hour and a half run into probably a 3-hour run, and it's just going to be miserable. So I actually hate that relic, but hard to deny the power of it, right? And that's a shop relic only, so he's choosing that quite a lot, 22 times out of that sample size. Hovering Kite performs quite well, but I guess I would have expected to see it more since he's so good at the discard thing. Maybe it could just be that he's not offered it that much. Orange Pellets, another one of those just stupidly powerful shop relics. No surprise to see that one represented quite well. Tough Bandages. I hardly ever seem to see this one. I think it's a rare relic, which makes sense why it comes up so little. Now this is an interesting med kit. I know it's good with Ironclad, but that's one we'll split out the characters and see if that changes this, because I don't know, I've never really liked medical kit, but it does seem like he does quite well with it. Buys it quite often. I mean, damn near as much as these like Frozen Eye and Orange pellets. So clearly it must be really good, right? But maybe I'm just not seeing the situations where it can benefit. Like, I only ever take it when it's like obvious to take it, which is like with Ironclad in some cases. But he must be taking it in pretty much some general scenarios, because it's taking quite a lot, and it's only a shop relic, right? So he's specifically spending money on it. Whereas, like, for me, I've bought Chemical X does pretty well for me. I think Chemical X is 100% win rate for me. But again, it's like a situational shop relic that you buy, and if you compare Chemical X to Medical Kit, like, he takes Medical Kit over 3 times as much as Chem X, right? Which is, it really shows me that there must be just a lot of general use for Medical Kit that I'm missing, right? Captain's Wheel, that's the turn 3 one of. I like this one a lot too. I like it better than Anchor. I still think I like Horn Cleat the best, but this one is represented quite well. 25 and 4 is quite good. Lizard Tail, Prayer Wheel, Paper Crane, Paper Frog. Interesting that Paper Frog does as well as Paper Crane. I wouldn't have expected that. I would definitely expect Paper Crane to do well, but Paper Frog, I would expect it to do okay, but not quite this insanely good. I mean, that's really good. 84% win rate. Gambling Chip, no surprise there. Threaded Needle, these are rare relics that are just really good. Wow, his Runic Dome win rate is impressive. That's honestly the first time I've seen that. That shows a severe, like, none of us are going to see this with our data. He has a 20 and 4 is like pretty decent take rate, and his difference from overall win rate is 26% positive. That is wild to me. I haven't seen that in anybody's data, so that just shows when you got a ton of experience, Runic Dome actually becomes pretty good and somewhat takeable, right? That definitely isn't the case for me. I don't think I've won a frickin' Runic Dome run. Wristblade, that's interesting. Very low take rate. I mean, a positive win rate, right? Quite a positive win rate, but only 6 times taken in that whole sample size. Because I've seen a lot of general praise for Wristblade from a lot of the other silent players, but it seems like he doesn't really value it that much. Which makes me wonder if in general, I didn't really see Shivs represented in his card pick data very highly either, right? So it does make me wonder if maybe Baalorlord just doesn't do Shivs very often. Ice Cream, pretty good. Ink Bottle, Pocket Watch. Yeah, I mean, there's so many we can go over here, right? But now let's look at the opposite end of it. Now, low sample sizes. I don't give a shit about these, right? Gremlin Mask, I mean, that's just means he got screwed on the event, right? And this is, by the way, not that I'd ever call it out. Like, feel free to send in your data if you reload and save scum. I don't care, right? But if you ever sent it in and were like trying to like compare yourself to streamers, I actually have a pretty good way I can tell if you save scum. Like, I can look at the rate that you get Gremlin Mask versus, say, whatever the better version of it is. Because, you know, you can save scum that event, right? There's a few of these events where I can basically tell if you save scum or not. And if I see that you barely ever, or if you never get Gremlin Mask versus getting like the, whatever the positive versions of those are that I always forget the name of, then I can have a pretty, I mean, it's not 100% positive, but I got a pretty good idea that you probably, are save scumming. But I'm honestly not even going to look at that if you send in the data. That's just something if I ever had somebody, you know, say like claim that doesn't stream or put out videos, like that try to claim like, hey, they're a world record win rate, that's like one thing I would look at, I suppose. But yeah, if you send in your data, I don't care. I don't care if you save scum or not. I'm not even going to call it out. I'm not even going to look at it. Whatever. It's just something some interesting thing that came to my mind when I saw Gremlin Mask. Crack core is just we got the default relics here, so who cares about those, right? That just shows actually that just means that Silent and Defect do worse from him than the other characters, right? Which is basically most people are going to see that. Calling Bell doesn't do too well. I've always thought this is kind of an overrated boss relic. But again, if he has to take it, sometimes there's no better choice, right? But it does at least provide some evidence that it's at least doesn't seem to be a super powerful or a super consistent boss relic, right? It can be powerful if you high roll, but an unremovable curse is a pretty fucked up thing to add to your deck, in all honesty. And if you're not getting good relics for it, then yeah, it's not going to be good. Doesn't surprise me that it's not like that high of a win rate relic, even though it does have to get taken a lot, just because that's the nature of the game. You could actually look at this though and maybe reevaluate your boss relic choices, right? Granted, sample size is only 33, which there's still going to be a decent amount of variance at that sample size, but it could be worth just playing around with, like the next time that he sees Calling Bell and the other choices seem like they're bad, maybe try the other choice, because it doesn't seem like Calling Bell... It's not like a massive drain on the win rate here, but it is somewhat significant, right? That's about a 10% lower win rate with a decent pick rate here. Could play around with maybe taking Calling Bell less and playing around with some of the other supposedly bad boss relics, right? But sometimes there just isn't a choice. Sometimes it just offers you trash. Sozu. No surprise there. It's of the energy relics, not so good of a one, because ever since they made potions really good, you're giving up a lot of power to take a Sozu. Technically still better than Calling Bell though, so maybe take a Sozu over Calling Bell a little bit. I don't know. That's getting pretty into the weeds. So no surprise on Tiny Chest. This frickin' artifact sucks. This is the one that every fourth question mark event you get a chest. To me, this is such a fucking horrible relic that it pisses me off, actually. It's like, you go through an Act 1 fight. This is most likely probably going to be found in Act 1, maybe Act 2 elite fight. You bust your ass to try to kill the elite, right? And this relic, this is what this relic says to me. It says, oh, you don't get a relic. If you happen to survive, since now you lost a bunch of HP probably, and wanted to add power to your deck, well, you don't get any power to your deck right now, but if for some reason you can survive 4 entire question marks from now, we'll give you the relic we should have gave you now. Oh, and also we'll just not let you have that event, because that event now has to get replaced with a frickin' chest event. It's fucking horrible. I hate this goddamn thing. The old version was better, and the old version sucked. Fucking horrible. Anyway, tangent aside, Shovel. I'm not surprised here. I've also thought Shovel is similar. Like, not as bad as Tiny Chests, but it's like, oh, that relic that you should have got now? Yeah, you don't get it now, but at your next campfire, you can give up a rest or an upgrade and get the relic you should have got. Now, of course, Shovel has a bit more upside in that additional campfires will have the option to get more relics, but you're also still giving up upgrades and HP for it, so it's not like that crazily good. It's obviously good for the memes, but not actually that good of a relic. And Tiny Chest, technically, yeah, if you keep hitting events, you could maybe get another chest out of it. I find that pretty damn unlikely, though. Like, you have to hit 8 total events to actually get a positive amount of relics from this. It's pretty unlikely. Peace Pipe is very similar to Shovel, I suppose, but I think Peace Pipe has more upside because there are definitely decks that massively benefit from Peace Pipe, right? Especially Watcher. Nuclear Battery, Regal Pillow. Yeah, Regal Pillow is always kind of sad to get to. You technically, it's like, yeah, you get a bunch of HP from the rest, but often resting isn't what you're doing, so it's like it's kind of a non-relic in a lot of cases. Interesting that Data Disk is so poorly represented here. I'm trying to remember. It is something that you buy, but I think you can get it from elites as well. So, and it's like, isn't it a common relic? So like, how the hell is he getting it so few times? I guess that's just a lot of variance, I guess. Because that's a really good relic, in my opinion. Sacred Bark, very underwhelming for a boss relic, in my opinion. A lot of potions don't even benefit from this, but then it's like, you know, it changes if you have a white beat statue or an alchemize or whatever. But like in general, again, kind of like how many times can you use a potion in a run relevantly, or how many times are you using it versus you're typically just saving it for the worst of the worst fights, right? So this isn't going to help you in like 90% of your fights, and then when you finally can use your potion, yeah, it's going to be nice, but I just want more of it, a boss relic. Out of my boss, it's kind of why I don't really like Slaver's Collar into Act 2. It's because Act 2 hallways are so bad that it's like by the time you actually benefit from your boss relic, you might just be dead or functionally dead at that point, right? Golden Idol. This is I've seen this with everything too. It's made me really wonder if it's that good. Now there is some context here, of course, right? Like this is an Act 1 event, so by nature of when you get it, you're generally going to have a lower win rate than usual because it's not like you're finding Golden Idol later on in the game, right? But at the same time, I've never seen it actually have a positive effect on any win rate. If it were a super powerful event, we should see that, right? But it just isn't. The amount of gold that you get from it isn't actually insane. And you do have to give up, you know, typically you're giving up max HP for it, which is not insignificant. That is a lot of, that can represent a lot of HP over the course of a run, factoring in rests and even just the healing you get from a boss fight. So, is it worth the gold? Probably yeah, but not so massively that it really has a huge positive effect on a run. I've even wondered if it's okay just to skip the damn event a lot of the time. It's something I'm going to play around more with, I think. Niao's Blessing, you know, that's just the Warp Tongs. Interesting with Warp Tongs. I have noticed a lot of the high level players taking this a lot less. And, you know, Pain is a pretty rough curse and you have to remove it. And Warp Tongs could be a little unreliable on what it upgrades. Like, it could just be more proper in a lot of runs just to simply target an upgrade on one card and not add a curse to your deck. So, I will say I've never seen Warp Tongs represented that well with either. There's still context there. Like, typically it's Act 1. You can find it in Act 2. I don't know if you can find it in Act 3. Maybe you can, but I find typically it just seems to come in Act 1. Even though I have definitely found it in 2. But yeah, now and then beyond there, that's the final of the ones that have an actual negative effect on the win rate, so I don't care too much about the rest. Now we get down to the Niao bonuses. Wow, he does frickin' boss swap a ton. That is way more than... man, I gotta say, I am so sour myself from my boss relics. It's like... We'll see. Well, I'll add, like... Maybe in a few days I will just run my data. I'm not kidding you. I never get a good relic from boss relic. And I have a 0% or I have almost like a very low win rate on boss relic. And literally the only time I think I've won is with horrible boss relic anyway. It was like with Busted Crown. Like my Busted Crown has won me boss relic. But it's like I get like ectoplasm frickin' tiny house, like so much bullcrap. And so it's like really skewed my perception of Boss Relic, but you can look here, it should be good, typically, right? He's taking it a ton, and it has a 68% win rate on it. So, I don't know. But the 3 enemy kill, that one you'll see a lot, because if you do happen to lose in Act 1, you're going to choose 3 enemy kill most likely. You're not going to choose max health. 1 rare relic is the first of like so like Boss Relic, 3 enemy kill, those are going to be present a lot more often than the others. But now the rest of these, other than like max HP, if he actually chose it, which clearly he doesn't, nobody really does. Now we get to the choices that are more random, right? Now of those, 1 rare relic is the highest here. And it actually performs quite well. So 19 and 7, 73% win rate. Pretty good evidence that the 1 rare relic is a pretty good Niao bonus to take. Random common relic also pretty well represented. Though the win rate, it's alright. 50% is lower than his overall win rate, right? So, I don't know. It could be maybe overvalued, I don't know. 100 gold, 52. Just a safe one to take, right? Random common relic and 100 gold. They're always like safe things to take because there's not really any downside. But the implicit downside with these, I guess, is that maybe on average they don't actually add a huge amount of power to your deck, whereas the other options might have. Just something to think about, I guess. Transform 2 cards performs pretty well, 60%. I like that one definitely. It's like, especially depending on the class, like you just start with bad stuff, right? And to remove the bad stuff and potentially turn it into pretty good stuff. And even if it doesn't turn it into high roll stuff, even a mid roll on transform is typically like a pretty good add of power to a deck. The only time it's obviously bad is if you get like setup or something from it, right? That will happen, but yeah, I don't know. Random colorless 2. That's interesting because it kind of goes in line. Like I don't love to take this one because I don't really value colorless cards that highly. It is interesting that it has one of the lower win rates of his Niao bonuses. Now this one's weird. Remove 2 I would have expected to do quite better, but it's actually the lowest on here. 39% win rate for remove 2. 250 gold is decent, but remember 250 gold you're paying something for it, right? There's some context there. Like, and same with remove 2. Remove 1 you're not. Remove 1 seems to do quite a lot better than remove 2. That might just go to show that could just be variance, you know. We're not talking about a huge sample size with these Niao bonus things, but you know, could also just be that the typical cost of choosing these options with the cost is maybe quite steep, right? And yeah, we get really low on the sample sizes down here, but you can kind of look at them for whatever. So Niao cost, most of the time he's choosing one that just doesn't have a cost, and it seems to do pretty well. 60% is higher than his overall win rate, so you can say that that's typically correct to do. 10% HP loss is also the most taken actual cost, which doesn't surprise me. Like, it is the only one that doesn't have any immediate downside, right? Like you lose 10% HP, but on Ascension 20, that doesn't mean you lost any actual HP in the context of where HP is currently at, because you already start damaged. Whereas all of these others have an immediate downside, right? And it's also no surprise that no gold is the next highest picked here, because it is similar to the 10% HP loss, where it's like technically you don't immediately lose anything, But there is the context that often you want to hit a shop in Act 1, and it does have a significant downside in that regard, right? But it's definitely... So, like, definitely the HP loss, basically throughout in the entirety of Act 1, you never really see that downside realized. You only really start to see it the more and more you rest, or the more and more, you know, you progress through the boss fights. But the gold is definitely realized pretty early on. And then these other ones, just like the percent damage is really brutal. It's a lot of damage, and you will immediately recognize that, right? You immediately just have less health. You have less buffer to get through the run with. And then a curse is similar. That's the one. It's interesting, though, because it's tough for me to evaluate curse, because I've seen the same thing in my own data and everybody's data that I ran. Curse is always the least chosen one, but it has like the highest win rate. I tried it. The way I'm rationalizing that is that you would only take a curse if the benefit was like really good. Now, you could also look at it another way, though. It'd be worth playing around with. Like, is curse actually not as bad as we think it is, right? Because it seems so scary, right? But maybe curse is just better. Is not as much of a downside as we make it out to be. It also could just be the fact that we're only taking a curse when the benefit is gigantic, right? But I don't know. That's something to play around with, because for what it's worth, I've seen this trend with everybody. Mine, everybody, now Baalorlord, where the pick rate is really low, but the win rate is always good. It's always the highest of all of them. Like if I sort by win rate, curse is highest. It's the same with everybody. I added some other stuff here that I'm not I didn't find it was like super interesting, but you know, for what it's worth, I looked at like how many times was campfire rested at, and what did the resulting win rate end up at. I've never been able to draw much conclusions here, but for what it's worth, you know, it seems like the more that you rest, it generally improves the win rate, but the context there is obviously that you're making it farther in the run if you're resting more. I need to play around with maybe a better metric here. Like, I think I need to like do like a ratio of campfire rest versus like campfire upgrade versus other stuff too that relics might provide. That might be a more interesting data point to go off of. So maybe in the next iteration of this dashboard, I'll change this panel, because it's not really that useful of information. And it's, you know, obviously is kind of the sister panel to the campfire upgraded here. I can probably just combine these and get a better thing, because even the upgrade isn't that useful to me, right? If there's a bunch more upgrades similar to a bunch more rests, that just means the run went on farther. I'd rather see what the ratio between resting to upgrade, if it has any effect on the win rate. Also purchase, this is going to include anything you can purchase, a potion, a card, a relic. So membership card, the highest amount here. No surprise there. The win rate's still really good, 78%, but it is interesting, like orange pellets, for example, even better. Now you'd never see a membership card and an orange pellets side by side in a shop. It can't happen, but I do wonder, would your typical streamer or typical player, if given the choice, choose orange pellets or membership card more often? I would say they probably choose membership card more often, but I wonder, what would be the correct choice in most cases? Would it actually be orange pellets? That's an interesting thought experiment, I feel. But yeah, Dolly's Mirror. Maybe Dolly's Mirror is only a shop relic, because I remember seeing 25 and 1 up there, so it must be a shop only relic, but it's just bought a ton, 96% win rate. Hard to deny the goodness of that. Orrery, another one. There's the med kit. I don't know. Med kit's just so weird to me. Clockwork Souvenir. Another thing. This is, by the way, good evidence on why you may want to, outside of maybe Watcher, who just generally benefits a lot from everything in a shop, maybe with the other three characters, good reason to go into a shop with enough money to afford this shop relic. Because look how frickin' positive the win rates here are. on all of these shop-only relics. Like Lee's Waffles, another one. Frozen Eye. And Vega Prep's the first general relic we get to. You know, it still has a positive effect on the win rate, but it's not quite the level of the actual shop relics, right? Apotheosis, technically not a shop-only card, but it is pretty much a shop-only card, right? You're either getting it from Niao, like one event can get you it, I think, and otherwise it's a shop card, right? Sling, Toolbox, Duplication Potion is the first potion represented here. Interesting that that is the top one. I would have thought like Liquid Memories is better, because to me, almost every situation you could dupe pot, you could Liquid Memories just the same, but Liquid Memories has the added benefit of pulling a card out when you need it. But it kind of makes sense that maybe dupe pot does have some advantages on like powers and cards that exhaust, I guess. So there's that. Cool-Headed is interesting that it gets bought a lot. That makes sense though. Probably bought later on in the game. Dark Shackles for the heart. Feel No Pain. 15-0 on buying that. That's very, very nice card. Power Potion. I respect his Prismatic Shard game. That's actually insane. He actually has a 75% win rate with Prismatic Shard. That's insane. And he's picking it 20 times. I don't think you'll find any other player or streamer that has worked with Prismatic Shard that much and done so well with it. You got to give props to Baalorlord that he's able to make that work. But that's interesting, right? Like, you could look at every other player's data and you would never see Prismatic Shard represented well. But if you have... So it's like you could maybe draw the conclusion that Prismatic Shard is complete shit. But actually, when I see him is able to make it work 15 out of 5 times, I don't know. Maybe it's more takeable than we think it is. We're just scared to take it, right? But he's got the balls to take it, and it's actually working out pretty well for him. I don't know. You know, these are the things, like, we don't want to get too pigeonholed. And this is why, by the way, I'm not a huge fan. I wasn't a huge fan of, like, I always loved, like, the daily discussion threads in Reddit. But they used to do them, like, a year or two ago, and they've restarted them recently. I still like them, but it's like, there's one big thing I don't like about how a lot of the conversations trend, where it's like, oh, you know, so-and-so does this, so this is just the correct way and no other discussion, right? That so often these discussions go that way. So, like, for example, like, you'd see back in the day when, you know, really it was like Jorbs and Baalorlord were like the only big players, I think, like 3 years ago or so, right? And it'd always just be like, oh, Jorbs does it this way or Baalorlord does it this way. This is the way, you know, end of discussion, right? And now it's like now it has shifted to like, oh, if it's like a silent card or relic, they're like, oh, Zeknar does this, so end of discussion, right? So like, you could see, I'm going off on way too much of a tangent, but it's like, you know, long story short, like, you know, you would get on a thread and you know, people would be like, oh, Prismatic Shard is horrible, right? It's just the worst freaking thing in the game. But then you get a player like Baalorlord that comes along and just clearly shows you can actually take it a decent amount of time and still win with it a very high amount of the time, right? So it's like, you're basically unallowed to even talk about, you're like disallowed to even talk about some of these cards or relics, trying to either give it a argument for whether it might actually be good or not, unless there's like a player's name attached to it doing well with it, right? I don't know if I formulated that thought well enough, but that's just something interesting to think about with Prismatic Shard. Panic Button 14-0, pretty nice. You'll know when it makes sense to take, and yeah, you can make it work pretty well. And then just a lot of these, you know, similar to Cool-Headed, it's like, you know, maybe later on, Act 2 and beyond, you just, not much, doesn't cost much to buy a Cool-Headed or Shrug It Off, and it's just gonna be useful. draws, it cycles itself. Cool-headed upgraded can even be positive in its draw, and it gives you defense. Typically going to be things you would just want to have for cheap, right? Hologram as well. But yeah, so on and so forth. We see a lot of this represented here. I don't know if there's any sense in looking at like low win rates. We can see if maybe there's something that has an actual sample size. Preserve Insect 2 and 8. Interesting. Honestly, I wouldn't have expected it because this seems like such a valuable relic. Again, it could just be variance. You know, in the 10 games that he bought it, shit just might have gone bad, right? But it is interesting. These can be things that you look at and start to think, is Preserved Insect actually worth buying? A lot of the time. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. But, you know, it's something to play around with, right? If you get more and more... Baalorlord did say he was going to release another set at the end of the year. It'd be interesting to look at it again and see with a larger sample size, does that change or does it just remain the same? Like, do we see it 4 and 20, for example? Like, maybe it just ends up being like that. Yeah, not a whole lot here otherwise. Like, it's 50% win rate. Not even, yeah, who cares, right? And strikes removed. I don't know. I couldn't glean much from that. Not even going to really bother talking about it, but you can look at that if you want. And then, yeah, like I said, we already went over relics, but I thought specifically boss relics was worth looking at as well. So, as we saw, Runic Pyramid, far and away the best in terms of overall takeability combined with wins, right? Technically, there are higher win rate relics represented here, but when you take something a higher amount of time, naturally it's going to be hard to actually have it be the highest win rate. I think when you see 42 and 16, that's a pretty damn good indication of a just incredible power level on this relic, because it means it's very, very takeable, right? A ton of I would have to imagine he's taking it almost every time he sees it to get that much of a take rate, right? And then on top of that, it just wins at a very high rate. Coffee Dripper, not as takeable, but still quite takeable. And still winning at a pretty decent rate. Astrolabe, I've always loved Astrolabe. It's performing quite well for him. It's his third most, winning artifact with actually, a very high win rate. Now, this one I was surprised to see again, right? Slaver's Collar, because to me, this is like a really strong going into Act 3 choice, but I almost always avoid it going into Act 2. I'd be interested to see, like, is he taking it into Act 2 a lot? If so, maybe I need to reevaluate it, but I will say it never performed well for me going into Act 2, but it's performed quite well into Act 3. But like with this high of a take rate, it seems like he's taking it quite a lot, but it's also like performing pretty well, right? So it seems to be pretty good. Fusion Hammer. This, by the way, not Fusion Hammer especially, not at all surprising based on every player that I've ran data for. Fusion Hammer seems to be like the most underrated relic in the game, perhaps. Like, because it always feels bad to take, and I never actually want to take it. But in the back of my mind, I always know it's probably the best choice in a lot of relic sets, right? Because it's fun to upgrade cards, and in your mind, you're like, can I make some of these cards work without being upgraded? But honestly, like, it actually always is like, it's always front page on overall wins, and it's always usually one of the top win rate relics. So it's just a really powerful relic. Giving up the ability to upgrade at campfires is probably not as much of a downside as we make it out to be, right? Pandora's Box, it's similar to Coffee or Astrolabe, but you'll see mixed results on this one. I actually have seen the common idea lately is that Pandora's Box is better. Now, he hasn't taken it as much as Astrolabe, but for what it is worth, it does have a better effect on his win rate. There's probably some context there in that Pandora's Box you typically don't want to take if you're like deck outside of defense just has no defense. But, I mean, you're likely to find defense from a Pandora's box, is the thing. So maybe it is just generally quite takeable. Hard to know for sure. Cursed Key, it's decent. Empty Cage, this one's particularly good on Watcher. I don't find it's like stellar on the other characters, but for what it's worth, I will say that it is always just performed kind of okay when I look at the data. It's generally takeable. It doesn't have like a negative effect on the win rate, but it also doesn't have like a massively positive effect on the win rate like a lot of these other ones. Black Star, this is interesting because I've seen this one. I used to hate it, but now that I started playing again this year, it's performed amazingly for me. And it's performing amazingly for Baalorlord too, which is funny because this is another one that kind of goes against the grain of what I see the common discussions are, like that. Basically, people are like Black Star sucks, right? I've come around on it. I think it's one of the better boss relics. The tough thing is obviously it does nothing for you when you pick it up, right? But particularly on Ironclad, I think it's rough to take on Silent and Defect for sure, but I think on Watcher especially, but also Ironclad, I think it is quite good. Because you kind of can get by without a boss relic. I feel like there's so much less reliant on boss relics. I mean, you can view my channel. I've literally had Watcher runs where I just straight up skipped a boss relic and still won, you know? But, yeah, I think it's pretty strong on those characters. Snekoi. Interesting. I've had such bad... This used to be my favorite boss relic in the game when I played before. This time around, I have not liked Snekoi nearly as much. It should be good. It just hasn't. My rolls have been so bad with it that it's just aggravating. But for what it's worth, it's still performing pretty well for him. It's not taken, though, as much as a lot of these others, which is worth noting, right? I think some classes can definitely benefit from it more than others, right? I think Ironclad probably benefits from it the most. And Runic Dome, again, this is just wild to me how good he can do with it. That's the first time I've seen that. But I already talked about that. Philosopher's Stone, Calling Bell. Calling Bell, the first one with a actual negative win rate, right? Like nothing on the first page had a negative win rate. Calling Bell does. Sacred Bark slightly does. Busted Crown, Hovering Kite. We're getting to pretty low take rates on a lot of these, right? Let's see. Wrist Blade. But overall, you're not going to see too many negative win rates represented just because, you know, if you're getting through a boss, then you already naturally have a higher win rate than your overall win rate probably is going to be. But like an Inserter is not that good. I'm not surprised here. I usually take it because it feels... It's one of those similar to a lot of these where there's technically no downside, but the downside is that you're not getting nearly the upside that you should get from a boss relic. So similar to like, you know, Sacred Bark, for example, where it's just so weak in terms of what you should be getting from a boss relic. I mean, compare Inserter, for example, to like Runic Capacitor, and you can see the massive difference there, right? You got to wait 6 turns, 5 if you prepped it the fight before, but 5 to 6 turns just to get what you would have just got from a Runic Capacitor. It's not really on the power of a boss relic. Mark of Pain performs well. I do think this is an undertaken relic. You'll notice Terrence is... I think it was Terrence. I want to, you know, don't quote me on this, but I think Terrence is pretty high on Mark of Pain and does pick it pretty often. I don't remember if it was Terrence or not, but some pretty high win rate streamer takes it quite often and does pretty well with it. We already talked about Sozu, Runic Cube. I mean, we're really getting to the lower end of things, but I'm surprised he takes Choker so little. I've actually found Choker is... Like, there's only 3 picks. I will say, just from personal experience and my data, even before I started the recent round of playing, Choker has always been pretty good. It just feels bad to take, right? You're not going to get a run that can do an infinite anymore, and you can't do like Shiv decks or spam decks, but I do think it's probably one of the most undertaken relics, and it's actually a pretty good relic. It just feels bad. But there are so many runs where you're not playing more than 6 cards in a turn, and it is basically a 0 downside energy relic at that point. And anytime you can add one of those energy relics with basically 0 downside, it's an incredibly powerful addition to your deck. So I do think Velvet Choker is severely undertaken. Now, I did say we were going to look at a few different things here, so let's go ahead, and I want to split out Act 1 versus the rest, and I want to group by character on a few of these. So it'll take a little bit for this to load. We can look at the card pick first, I guess. So, you know, we can... oh god, hopefully I didn't just break it here. Please don't break. I'm working, I didn't build this thing super efficiently, I'll say that. Here, let's just pop this out in a new tab anyway. I will fix this. I'll let that load while we do this. So relic data. Was there anything we cared about here? We were going to look at, like... So... Interesting that Defect has his most bag of preparation picks. Bag of Marbles with Ironclad is no surprise. I would probably expected to see on a Watcher as well, but there's a lot of variance here, right? But yeah, Viara on Watcher and Ironclad makes sense. Not so much interesting there in the relic data, I would say. Okay, we got this stuff now. So, it's interesting, right? We looked at Defect, and I had made the comment of like, yeah, he's picking at the most of any card, but don't put too much stock in that, because it doesn't mean you should just start adding it like Act 1 willy-nilly, right? And this is actually proven out here. So 38 of the 40-some choices of hologram for Defect were not taken in Act 1, right? They were taken in the rest of the acts. And still with an even higher win rate, right? It was like 8% positive win rate before. Now it's 16% positive win rate compared to his overall win rate. So yeah, it is interesting to see. And same with Ironclad, right? Like I had mentioned, like Cool-Headed. We'll probably see, I'm guessing we'll see Cool-Headed similar, but like, even though it's a common card, right? Shrug It Off and Hologram. They're much more taken outside of Act 1. Acrobatics as well. Makes sense. I think people have been taking Acrobatics more in Act 1 these days, just because of how much upside there is, but it definitely just is gonna perform better outside of Act 1 typically. Piercing Wail as well. Another common that just, it's not so good Act 1, but past Act 1 it is. So these are like, I think these are important things to distinguish, right? Because if you see, oh, they like a common card, you're mostly seeing commons in Act 1, right? So you don't, even though you see a lot of these cards represented as having really high win rates and pick rates, you kind of want to get the context of when he's choosing them, right? You don't, like you don't want to just add a bunch of Piercing Wails and Cool-Headeds to your deck Act 1, for example. Now, conversely, Dagger Throw, which it can go both ways, right? We saw Dagger Throw as one of his most picked silent cards. However, this one is chosen in Act 1 nearly all of the time. It's not chosen outside of Act 1. So, oh my god, that is woo! I can't tell you how crazy good that a 41.58% positive effect on his win rate by picking in Act 1. Already you have to figure in the fact that it is an Act 1 ad means the win rate is skewed lower than normal. So the fact that he's picking in Act 1 resulted in 26 and 3. Oh my god, he's doing good. It's so funny because like I have such a poor win rate with my Act 1 dagger throw ads. It just shows how much gap there is in my silent play versus like high level silent play, right? I'd be interested to see Zeknar's win rates because he has supposedly like an 85% win rate overall with silent. I'd be really curious to take a look at Zeknar's stuff, but this is just such a crazy stat to me. Like choosing dagger throw Act 1 26 and 3. That's wild. Interesting that for Watcher he's choosing cut through fate the majority of the time in Act 2 to 4. I would not have expected that. Like, I'm typically adding that Act 1, but I guess it makes sense. He is playing it less on the... Doesn't seem like he's going for the Merrill type play. So if he's just doing like a generalized Watcher stuff, adding a card draw and scry outside Act 1 probably makes sense, right? Ironclad Burning Pact makes sense. Can you really justify early in Act 1 Burning Pact? You can, but not nearly as much as you can throughout the rest of the game. Defect Beam Cell Act 1 makes sense. Also interesting, Shrug It Off, for what it's worth, still takes in Act 1 quite a lot. Not nearly as much as Act 2 and 3, right? Or Act 2 to 4. But, it's still taking a decent amount of time in Act 1. So it's not like you just always don't do it. It's just... And in fact, that if you think about it, I'm comparing one act versus, we'll say 2 acts. Act 4 isn't really an act, but you could even argue actually it's just taken evenly at all acts, right? If it's taken 21 and 9 times in Act 1 versus 36 and 11 in the rest of the acts, it actually means he's kind of just always taking it when he sees it. Or he's not always taking it when he sees it, but he takes it at a high rate kind of throughout the game, right? Backflip. Yeah, a backflip, another common that's just much better outside Act 1. Same with Calculated Gamble. Echo Form. Echo Form is just a really strong card. He still takes Cut Through Fate in Act 1 as well. So maybe Cut Through Fate, similar to Shrug It Off, is just sort of taken a lot. Now this one's interesting. The Hologram, taking a decent amount in Act 1, but it doesn't actually perform massively well, right? I would still say it performs well. You factor in if we see Act 1 here, it's going to have a lower win rate by nature of just Act 1 deaths, Act 2 deaths, but so it's not like it's bad, but it is significantly better outside of Act 1. You can see the Hologram is. Don't know if there's like too many. I don't know how far down this we have to go, but maybe we can just really quick look at it from terms of difference from the overall win rate. Adrenaline Act 1 7-0, just a powerful card. I don't think that really. We're not going to get a huge amount of value, I think, from looking through these because there's just not enough sample size to gleam here. Maybe we can look at the opposite. Maybe we see something here like. I doubt it. Let's like go forward a little bit. We don't want these like really slow. I would say this is not outside what I've seen. Leap, taken Act 1. It's been a while since Jorb's released any more recent data, but I know in the 2 years ago or whatever, I looked at that data. I saw similar stuff with Leap. It's like it just doesn't seem to perform that well. And it's often taken in Act 1. I mean, I assume if you're taking Leap Act 1, your deck sucks anyway, so there is that context, but I think there's good... I just don't think Leap is that good of a card. There's no utility, there's not much upside, it's just like kind of adding an upgraded defend to your deck, and I guess you can upgrade it to have even more defend, but I don't know. It's like there's just not much upside with this card, and I don't think it's that impactful. I guess you're just in a really rough spot when you pick it anyway, though. I do wonder, though, if you're just better off not picking it. But yeah, that's about all we got there. We could look at the enemy encounter data per character. I don't know if that changes much. You know, Watcher takes less damage from the heart, I guess. That's one thing we can see. The other three are about the same, 40, 38, 37, but it's only 26 for the Watcher. Ironclad seems to take damage into Act 2 bosses more. I don't know if that's anything significant. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know if there's a whole lot there. We looked at the relic data. I don't know if there's any big changes here. Yeah, they're about the same. I don't know if like does Watcher benefit more from apparently the transform? I don't know. Yeah, just not enough sample size to see much there. Purchase I'd be interested in, because I was interested in the status exhausting relics. So do I actually see most of those just ironclad? We'll find out. What was the name of that one again? It's medical kit. But let's just sort by the name. We can find it probably easier there and compare them across the... So many to get through here. LMNOP, LM... So medical kit. Okay, I mean, it's not... Yeah, weird. So it's just generally taken. Like, it's not even... Like, it's not even the highest represented in Ironclad. It's tied with Watcher. Taking the least in Silent for whatever that's worth, and then taking in Defect about as much as he takes it. So I don't know. This one's weird to me. Medical kit, exhausting status cards. I get it for Ironclad. I don't really get it for the other classes. I mean, I guess Defect can have that burn card, but it didn't seem like he was taking that much. I didn't really see it anywhere in his most taken cards. So maybe it just has general use. I mean, certainly a lot of stuff does shuffle wounds into your deck, so I'll have to think about it. And if you notice, it has high win rate in all the classes too, right? So I don't know. Medical kit. Probably worth me exploring more, because I really never buy this outside of Ironclad. Something for me to think about. And then I think last but not least, we can look at the boss relics. So interesting, the Slaver's Collar. I guess I don't have it split out Act 1 to the rest. Oops, I'll have to do that at some point. But yeah, I would have been really interested to actually see if it was Slaver's Collar was getting chosen in Act, as an Act 1 reward. But I suppose he boss swaps so often that it also just that there's going to be representation there as well. Not like he can choose the boss swap, but like I suppose the Slaver's Collar as a boss swap Act 1 performs pretty well. Watcher, Runic Pyramid, Silent Runic Pyramid, and there's just everybody picks Runic Pyramid. Slaver's Collar though is, maybe we'll just do this by name as well. So that'll give us more of an idea if there's massive differences between the classes on any of these. Like Black Star is not what I expected. I expected it with the Watcher, but I didn't think Defect would actually be the highest represented here. To me, Defect typically needs some help from boss relics, not as much as Silent, but like I feel like Ironclad and Watcher really can get it done regardless of boss relics, whereas Defect and Silent need them. But yeah, very interesting that Defect actually Ironclad is his least used Black Star class. Busted Crown, apparently Watcher is by far the highest. I guess, I don't know, because the way he plays Watcher is so different from the way I'm playing it that it's hard for me to know. Like for me, I just can't see taking that on Watcher too much because I really am probably hunting for the final pieces of my combo at any point in the game, but I guess it could make sense. Calling Bell, nothing interesting there. Defect, makes sense. I think that Ironclad is represented the best here. A class that naturally heals. Probably has an easier time with Coffee Dripper, right? Watcher performing well with it as well. Probably just because they don't tend to take damage. Cursed Key, nothing there. Ectoplasm. Empty Cage, Defect having it the most. Well, not really. They're all about equal, just Ironclad seems to not take it as much. For me, I would assume Watcher gets it significantly more than the others in my own, but that's because I'm doing a specific strategy with the Watcher. The Fusion Hammer, across the board good. We have a lot of class-specific relics, so that doesn't matter. Pandora's Box, basically equal, kinda. No huge outliers. Runic Pyramid just taken across the board, no surprises. Slaver's Collar, still kind of taken across the board, I'd say, but for whatever reason, Silent has the best use of it. I mean, I guess Silent needs an energy relic the most, so that could be part of it, but I don't know. Snecko Eye, Ironclad 9 and 1 versus Defect 6 and 4. And then not really taken on Silent or Watcher, but performing well on Watcher when he takes it. That's kind of how I view Snecko Eye with Watcher, because Snecko Eye with Watcher is actually insane with their rare pool, but just not that good with the rest of the stuff. I do feel like overall Snecko Eye is probably more takeable with Watcher than we get it credit for, even if your current deck doesn't utilize it that well, but it just doesn't fit. Like when I'm trying like the Merrill strategy, I just don't see myself taking Snecko Eye, right? But if they ever nerf that strategy, I would assume Snecko Eye is a pretty good Watcher take. And yeah, the rest of this, just not much. So that's about all there is to go over. Oh, and we can also see per character that it's not like the trends kind of follow similarly for a lot of these. I guess Silent might lose a little more in Act 3 compared to the rest, but like, Act 2 is like, Act 2 versus Act 4 follows about the same trends within each character, right? So he just overall does seem to handle Act 2 quite well. Very interesting. Worth maybe me analyzing his Act 2 play the next time I watch some Baalorlord runs and see if there's anything that massively stands out. Well, hopefully that was useful. Thanks to Baalorlord for, submitting that data for all to use. You gotta respect players for doing that. It's really fun to try to gain some insights, even if those insights are wrong. I like to try to look at it and draw some sort of use out of data, right? And as I said at the beginning, if you want a report like this, just send me your data, and I will plop it back out to you. If you want any specific filters on here that you're interested in, just let me know, and I'll do it. I'll probably just by default send you the generalized character data. Kind of basically the filters I have right now is what I'll default to, but if you want different filters, just let me know. And obviously I'll change the player to your player. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.